We're parents, teachers, and educators, and like you, we're passionate about restoring our culture for Christ. This is Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education.
Hello again, I am Marlon Detweiler, and you've joined us on Veritas Vox, the voice of classical Christian education. Today we have an interesting and unique visitor, and you'll find out why in just a moment. Tessa, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We are so excited to have Tessa. She was part of the first year we ever offered online classes, and I'll give you some detail about that, and we'll ask Tessa some questions about her experience, especially how it's moved with her through her life. But Tessa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first, your background and how you got connected with Veritas, and I'll ask some other questions. I don't want to give you too many questions at one time.
Okay. Yes, so I am one of 6 kids, and we started homeschooling the year I was in kindergarten. And I think very early on, my mom had, just through homeschool conferences, gotten connected with Veritas. So I think in 3rd grade, we started.
Yeah.
Yes. So even from an early age, I did a lot of Veritas curriculum, and I loved it. Some of my most favorite homeschool memories with my mom include those history cards.
You grew up in the Chicago area?
Yes. Eventually we moved out to Northwest Illinois, so kind of near Iowa.
Okay. Now, tell us what you do currently and a little bit about your own family.
Yes. So now I currently teach art and art history at a Christian school in the middle of Iowa. And I have been married for 1.5 years to my husband, Sam, and we're actually expecting our first child in February.
Congratulations, in February.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. And you are teaching at a Christian school in central Iowa. Is that correct?
Correct.
Tell us
Yes.
what do you teach?
I teach high school art, and then I also do a section of art history, which is one of my passions. I actually have a master's degree in art history.
Oh, wow.
So I like that I get to still dabble in that and share my passion with my high school students with that. But I also teach the very little kids, so kindergarten through 2nd grade as well.
Yeah. Oh, so you teach high school. What do you teach for the little kids then? Is that a subject or the whole collection?
Yeah, just art still.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yes.
So one of the things that was so fun to reconnect over was the fact that you were in our first ever online class. And I should probably lay a little bit of background for the listeners, our viewers, about that. It was 19 or so years ago that we saw what was happening educationally with technology, and we thought that it was getting to a point where having online classes would be an effective thing and a helpful thing, especially in teaching classes that were hard for parents to teach. So we jumped in, as you know, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know now, with 2 classes, 1 teacher, and the course was the same. It was 2 classes of the same, 2 sections of the same class. Omnibus 1, primary books. And as, of course, most people listening will know, the Omnibus is our great books curriculum, where we're reading great works of literature, history, and theology, primary source materials, and that sort of thing, and discussing them in class. We limited the class size to a smaller class than normal, than what it is today, because we didn't know what to expect and wanted to make sure that we didn't have too much too soon. And I forget, they were 16, I think, 16 students per class. Does that sound right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I think so. And they filled up very quickly. And it was immediately apparent to me in my first observation of a class with the teacher that was teaching and watching the whole process, that it was far better than even I imagined it could be, the interactions and that sort of thing. But what's your recollection of your class experience going to an online world at a time where there wasn't much teaching online?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about where we started at the beginning of the year and the program that we used. I don't even remember what it was called, but
I think we used WebEx originally.
Oh, okay.
That sound right?
That sounds familiar. Yeah, you literally had to like dial a phone number into.
Is that right?
Yes. And we had no webcams.
Right.
And you just kind of had to pass the mic. So yes, it was kind of a scary thing for the teacher to hand over that power to the student to answer. But of course, it went well. But yeah, by the end of the year, I think we had switched programs, maybe, or maybe we just jumped on something. But I remember being
I don't remember the detail. I'm sorry.
No, I can't either. But I remember being very excited to finally see our teacher's face through a webcam, and then eventually we got to see everyone else's face. So that was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the technical side of that.
At that time, what was it that motivated you and your parents to say, let's go try this?
Yeah, I'm trying to recall. I loved Veritas curriculum, like I had said before, with the cards. So I think this opportunity, especially where we were living, we were kind of living in the middle of nowhere, rural, didn't have opportunities for a lot of co-ops or anything like that. So this opportunity to have a live class was really exciting. So I think that was probably a huge driving force.
Yeah. Did you have any students from outside the country, or I know you had them from all over the country, and what I'm getting at with the question is what the benefit was of the cultural diversity and upbringings because of geography and how that impacted the learning and the experience?
Sure. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. We had a couple missionary kids. I remember that for sure. I think they had to get up at a kind of a crazy hour. Kind of insane to think about just different time zones. So I think they were maybe in Asia. I forget what country exactly.
Yeah, that would make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and then all across the US for sure too. And we would come in early and stay late just to chat online. And we definitely developed a pretty close relationship with everyone. So that was pretty cool.
Before we get into content and the subjects themselves, or the subject material, how would you say that being in a smaller rural area and being exposed to a broader selection of kids geographically and different experiences, how did that impact you then, and has it had an impact that's continued?
Yeah. I guess at the time I didn't really think about it. It just was kind of natural. Yeah. But then later on in life, when I'm sharing stories of, oh yeah, I know so-and-so who lives there, it gave me a bigger vision of the world and different cultures and just the different activities students were involved in that I knew nothing about, but learned through them. Just different lifestyles as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've often told this story. Well, first of all, it was the unexpected benefit of an online class to me when I saw students from multiple countries or from the North and the South and the West or whatever it might be coming together and being able to relate from their context and have other students broaden their understanding, see broader horizons. It's a funny thing to think about learning about Benedict Arnold the traitor in the War for Independence. But when you think of it with a student from England joining the class, he's a hero. And now you've got to wrestle through those differences and those considerations, because we've got some very different things, very different presuppositions to which we come to the same information, depending on the perspective we come from. And it's fascinating to consider that in light of building a real comprehensive biblical worldview. Do you have any examples that might come to mind that would help you there? I know that's taxing and it's a long time ago. I'm glad you're not asking me that question, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of specific examples of that, but I guess with Omnibus 1, we were mostly dealing with ancient history,
True.
but we definitely had North and South. I'm sure that came up.
Yeah.
Just hearing different opinions and stuff like that. I guess maybe theologically is the biggest example, because in Omnibus 1, we did a lot of biblical reading.
Right. Yeah. So. Yeah. It really, the breadth of theology doesn't require a geographic breadth, but it still has different contexts and different perspective. What are the things that stick with you today that you learned from those early classes? Obviously, the Omnibus 1 primary online was a class that you took for the first year, but I know you took other online classes too. And now that you're, almost 20 years hence, what are the things that stick with you that have made a difference to you?
I think broadly speaking, it definitely helped me to think deeply, to think through everything I read, to filter it through a biblical worldview. Definitely gave me the tools, what questions to ask, what thoughts to think, and what to wrestle with. And then, like you were saying before, different perspectives for sure. Not being closed-minded to other perspectives, but really trying to understand where someone else is coming from and their thought process, and not just believing what I believe, but really wrestling with their perspective as well, and holding that up to the biblical worldview.
Yeah.
But then also, I would say it helped me learn how to read hard material and not just...
Oh, I'll bet, especially Omnibus 1 primary, you get into Herodotus and some of the other works that have been translated, but they still have an awkwardness to them that we're not used to in today's language use.
Yeah. And I think with all that reading, also, it definitely helps my writing, being able to write clearly. And that definitely impacted the way, I guess, obviously through college, but and then into grad school.
Yeah. You're teaching art and art history. Those early classes, especially the Omnibus, how have they impacted your ability to be an effective teacher of art history and even of art, the doing of art, not just talking about it and its history?
Mm-hmm. I think while I don't teach at a classical school, I kind of have that tendency, because I was trained that way, just the way I ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely, in fact, I still have my omnibus textbooks and just like thinking through the structure of how to ask questions. So that's definitely on the art history side of things, but even in art, wanting them to learn how to think for themselves and ask questions about, not just draw a picture of a flower because they like it, but wanting them to think deeper and wrestle with issues of the day and different perspectives and thoughts, and how can that come through their art. So I don't want it just to be all about arts and crafts, but actually developing skills and deep thinking.
So I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you suggesting that when you're teaching art history, one of the things you really enjoy that you have taken with you from your experience is what we might call a Socratic approach of teaching by asking students questions.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
Can you give an example of how that kind of plays out and how you're able to be a teacher that's a facilitator more than a lecturer? Because that is such, to me, I'm so glad to hear you say that that's what you learned and valued enough to do it yourself. Maybe you can give some examples of how that's benefited your students.
Yeah. I think I start off by showing works of art, and I guess that's the kind of the grammar stage of just saying, what do you see? And letting them pull those things out. And as they bring things up, then ask them, what do you think it means? Of course, leading them to take into account what is happening in history at that time, what ideas. So instead of being so vague, I'll just give a specific example.
Oh, good. I was hoping you could recall one.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like Greek sculpture, for example. The Greeks were so into man and the perfection of man.
Yeah.
So we look at a lot of human sculptures, and I lead them through that process. What do they see? What do they notice? It's these idealized humans. And eventually we start to talk about their philosophy and why they think that. And it's this idea of the perfection of man. So I'm thinking of the Doryphorus, if you've ever seen that sculpture. Okay.
I may have seen it. I can't tie it to
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's literally called the canon. Sometimes it's like the perfect human being. Everything is measured to this. So then eventually we take that to the biblical worldview, and I give them a take-home assignment and talk about, okay, what is God's idea of the perfect human? And I want them to wrestle through that. And then eventually we come back together and talk about it as a class. Wow. So that's just kind of a little snippet.
And what age students are these? These are juniors and seniors in high school?
Anyone in high school.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. Boy, it really does provoke good thinking, and I'll bet you have some great conversation with your students. So you have a family starting of your own. What have you thought about for that child to be born in a few months, and how you might want to educate? I can't say him, I can't say her, and them is plural, and I don't think you didn't say you're having twins, so I'll say the baby.
Yeah. It has always been my desire to I have a passion for Christian classical education. So whatever form that would look like. Obviously I had a great experience with Veritas and online and the other curriculum that you guys offer. So whether, I guess it just depends geographically where we're at and what opportunities provide themselves, but I still get the Veritas catalog and I still pour over it. And so that has always been my dream, to maybe homeschool at the beginning, and then who knows what the Lord might make.
And I can tell you're thoughtful and not one to just follow someone else's lead. So as you look back on your education and you see the education of the children around you at the school, what do you say to yourself, I want to do this differently? What are the things that you think you can improve upon from what you experienced?
At the school I'm at now, or?
Well, no, I'm talking about primarily really your experience.
Oh, okay.
Given your experience, what do you say? I really want to do this differently. I want to do this better. Parents almost always look at their experience and think in terms of what they can do to improve on it. And I like to think of that, of children standing on the shoulders of their parents, as opposed to being contrary to their parents. They want to improve on it, not you know, in a good experience, like it sounds like you had, it would be the idea of how I can make it even better.
Yes. Well, I would say I always regret that I was a junior and a senior when the online classes came out. I always wished I had such a positive experience that I had more of that. So I guess that's one thing I've always thought, like, I
Good.
want more. Yeah. I think I would do something similar with, like I said, my favorite memories are the history cards with my mom. Like, I loved that time. So I would definitely do that and more of that. Just, I guess, that on steroids. So
Yeah. Oh, that's so good to hear. It, you know, it helps Laurie and I get up in the morning to hear experiences of how our work has been appreciated and benefited. So thank you. Let me ask you, what would you tell parents who might be on the fence when they think about not just online classes, but classical Christian education in general? What would you tell them if they say, I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure what to do?
I feel like in the world we live in today, it's becoming all the more important that we have the ability to think deeply, going back to what I was saying before, and to take into consideration other people's perspectives and not just saying, oh, we don't do that, we don't read that, that's not what we believe, but to actually be able to read opposing views, pagan views, and then in that safe environment with fellow believers to unpack those things and to wrestle with them, I guess, logically, and just being able to articulate those things. I think that's the biggest benefit that I would say for sure.
Yeah, it's really been important to us that if we believe we hold the truth, that biblical worldview thinking is the truth, and we believe that with all our hearts, that there is nothing that won't stand up to being challenged in a way that would draw us away from that. And to be prepared, as it seems that you have been, to address pagan thinking and humanistic thinking and man-centered thinking, however we want to characterize it, and be able to study it and pick it apart and understand the truth and why that is not the truth. That's why we created the omnibus curriculum, to teach. People will ask me, what did you want to accomplish with it? And my answer is very simple: to teach people, to teach you how to think biblically about everything.
Mm-hmm.
Does that resonate with your experience? Is that
For sure? Yes.
It's one thing for me to want to do that. It's another thing for it to have been accomplished in your life.
And I would say that was a huge influence for me wanting to teach art. I kind of wanted to bring in that biblical perspective. I taught a couple years at a public school, which it was a great experience and I loved it, but I knew I needed to get back to being able to bring in that biblical worldview and teaching students how to do that.
Yeah, that is great. Do you have anything that you'd like that I didn't ask you about that you'd really like to share with our listeners?
I'm trying to think. I guess along with just these broader statements that I've been making, like I do have specific memories of specific discussions.
Oh, that'd be great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, oftentimes in high school, we read things for the test and just move on and we forget what the stories are. But what I loved about Omnibus was the discussions that we had. So some things I was thinking about this last night that stood out to me was from the Aeneid. I have no idea why this is such an impactful discussion that I remember, there was a question that said, what constitutes a marriage? Because it was talking about Aeneas and Dido. And I had never really thought about it before. I just came at it with, well, I think my sister was getting married at the time. Like, you need to go to the courthouse, get a license and all these things. It's like, no, that was such a shallow way of thinking. To really go to the Bible and to unpack for ourselves, what does the Bible say? What does the Lord say about what constitutes a marriage? So while it's a specific memory about marriage, I've been able to apply that to so many aspects of my life, just to stop and think deeper about it.
There are some really significant ideas that we kind of take for granted, and you give one there. I'm curious, can you provide us a good, healthy, comprehensive answer? What is a marriage?
Well, now I would say it's a covenant between a man and a woman and God. So that's kind of my succinct answer.
I don't want to start an omnibus class, but I'm tempted to say, what do you mean by covenant between? But I'm not going to. Do you have other examples you want to bring up?
I mean, I guess with writing as well, I remember I love the outlines that Omnibus provided. I think one of my favorite things to write about was, I think we had to write a paper on Odysseus when we were reading the Odyssey. And I kept coming back to those structures throughout college and grad school, how to write a well-crafted essay. So I guess that's another example that mind.
I'm curious. I hear people say this, and this is obviously far-fetched from Omnibus, another day of not using algebra. And I want to laugh because I know I like math, and I know that we use aspects of algebra every day and people don't even realize it. How would you comment on that kind of naivete? How have you been able to get past the idea that maybe somebody might say, why are we reading the great books? Why aren't we just learning things that will help us get a job?
I feel like if these books have stood the test of time throughout many, many generations, and people are still reading them, then we should pay close attention to, they obviously have something important to say. They're obviously dealing with things outside of their own time, not just constrained to their own time, but across all time. So I think that's one big thing. I mean, history repeats itself, right? So if we just ignore the past, then we're in for a load of trouble, I would say.
Yeah, ignoring the past makes certain we will be unprepared for the present, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this has been really good. It's so fun to think about somebody in your position that, like I said, nearly 20 years ago, took an online class and was part of our early stages. I don't know if you know this, but now we have well over 10,000 students, and I'm told from 70 countries.
Wow, that's crazy.
We're not one teacher, two sections of one class anymore, for sure. And it has been remarkable to see and to hear the stories. But I don't get very often to hear the story of somebody that was there the first year. So thank you, Tessa.
Yes, thank you.
Folks, this is Veritas Vox. Thanks for joining us, the voice of classical Christian education. Until next time, bye-bye.